I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is the Tech Central podcast brought to you today by Obscure Technologies. Now, I'm going to be talking to Brenton Swanepoel today. He's head of the technical team at Obscure in South Africa, and we're going to be chatting about data security and data breaches, of which there have unfortunately been quite a few in the last few months. We're also going to touch on the element of human weakness or human frailty within the discussion of cybersecurity, and it's an area that is still surprisingly somewhat overlooked. Brenton, welcome to the podcast. We tried to arrange this towards the end of last year, but it didn't quite get it right. So I'm glad we're finally getting a chance to chat. Thank you, and welcome to the podcast.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Obscure Technologies, you are a Silicon Valley-based company, if I remember correctly. Tell me a bit about Obscure and what it is you guys do and your specific role within the organization.
So basically, Obscure has been born around focusing on distributing security solutions. So we've been around for a couple of years now. I think it's almost close to 5. And we've always had niche security solutions come into our stack, and we kind of take on the creme de la cremes of the industry. When we take new products on board. And with my role within the company is basically heading up the technical team. We've got a couple of pre-sales engineers under me. We have professional services within the business, as well as support services for some of the solutions that we do distribute. And these support services are towards the end customer as well, and then also offering professional services on behalf of our partners.
Okay, what's your background, Brenton? Have you always been in the information security field?
Yeah, I pretty much started with it. I think the interest came in when my mom was into forensic investigations, my dad was into IT, and I tried to mix and match the two. And so basically the one day I was sitting in my dad's office and I was fooling around in his network. And subsequently I had a pen testing company find what I was doing with their boxes, and they gave me a job and hired me as a penetration tester. So I was sitting, I was doing that for a little while. And then I got into Obscure Technologies probably about a year and a half later.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've grown into pre-sales, or I started off as pre-sales in Obscure, and then I've grown into the technical lead role.
Okay.
And but my background is mostly around the offensive security side of things. Obviously, being a distribution business focused on security solutions, we do have to understand the blue team side of things as well. Good looking at data breaches, how to protect against them, and things like that. But obviously, having the elements of how to do it and achieve these things is actually quite cool. I think it's an element to take to market.
I imagine the job has many fun aspects, a career in the cybersecurity field, but I imagine it's also a very stressful job at times, is it?
No, all we do is drink whiskey and sell solutions.
You're not supposed to give away all your secrets, Brenton.
Not all the secrets. No. So yes, it could be at times. Obviously, if you're sitting in an environment where you need to defend crown jewels, you have a very stressful job.
Yeah.
Especially if you're looking after not only the security solutions, you're looking after people. The topic of today as well. They are the weakest elements, and you can't force a user to not click on something. You can train them, but you're never going to stop them from actually doing that all the time. You always have a patient zero. If you're protecting crown jewels, it could be a very stressful job, especially for the guys, CISOs and the guys in those higher up roles.
Yeah.
They've got very important roles.
Yeah, I'd imagine a CISO at a bank whose job is to defend the bank against hackers and intruders probably doesn't sleep all that well at night, especially since we know that attackers are constantly trying to penetrate those fortresses. It must take its toll on you over time, I imagine, and requires a certain type of personality. Is this industry does this industry attract a certain type of personality, do you think?
I would say yes and no. I would say mostly people that think out of the box, they would do quite well in the industry. People that have a mind for tinkering with things, understanding how underlying technology works and underlying processes and things like that. If you grasp it, or once you start grasping it, it becomes quite fun, to be quite honest. I think you do need to have a keen interest in either protecting or breaking into things, and both would be very fun.
Great. Well, the topic today, as you mentioned, is the human element, if we can call it that, in information security. We know this is traditionally, and I suspect still is, the biggest weakness in the information security chain. And we've seen some recent examples of this, of course, including an incident involving our former senior employee at one of our large banks. What are some of the recent high-profile breaches and leaks that we've seen? And how have these typically occurred?
So there are quite a few. It could range anywhere from, well, the initial compromise could be anything from a phishing email coming in or exposed services that shouldn't be exposed that have weaknesses in them. Where the guys can probe and they can find these weaknesses and actually penetrate through those flaws. There's a lot of ways to break into an organization, a lot of avenues to go and defend. Some of the recent ones, over the past couple of years, we've seen big labels like Facebook, Twitter. Some of these adult sites, funny enough, are big ones as well. There's breaches being uploaded to a couple of the sites and paste sites that we monitor ourselves as well. There's a if you're not looking at the high profile breach, we're talking like 80 million user accounts being compromised or more. In those ranges, there's sometimes guys that are posting these credentials for simple things like Netflix or Twitter accounts or things like that. They're posting these on Pastebin or these different dump sites, and we scrape this information. And I think in the past month alone, we've collected possibly over 100 million different unique strings from these different paste sites, which is quite interesting.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's actually quite cool. So what the guys are doing is once they find, it could be so for people, if you're looking at the Netflix accounts example, typically they have weak passwords, maybe like a password that goes 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, or some of the funny ones, QWERTY, is a classic example. There's a whole bunch of them that people use. And then you can just reuse those passwords in different accounts. It's quite easy to create a script to basically go and reuse those credentials somewhere else. And the danger of that actually comes in when those credentials can be reused in the corporate world. Your Office 365 credentials are the same as your Netflix credentials, and it's been compromised. Obviously a big problem.
This is a little bit off topic, but the subject of passwords has interested me for some time. I'm one of those who was guilty back in the day, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I first started using computers. My default password across all websites that I used was "let me in 01." And I probably used that for a couple of years before I realized I was being really, really stupid. These days, I use a password manager. All my passwords are machine generated, and they're all
that's good.
very, very long and consist of uppercase, lowercase numbers and characters. Passwords, though, not everyone wants to use a passwords manager. People are stubborn. They don't want to pay for the convenience of having a password manager. Do we need an alternative to passwords? Has the concept of the password literally failed us?
I think a password will always exist. We'll always need it. We do have. Yeah, I agree with you. Some people wouldn't want to use password managers. I was dealing with someone in my family. Actually, my dad. He doesn't want to use these things. Because it's sometimes it's hard to adopt to the newer things, right? And he understands that he needs to reuse passwords. He actually eventually did it. He's doing it now.
Okay.
But just because I showed him his weak password that he's been using for years. So I think passwords will always exist, but it's an important thing to add things like a second factor to any authentication that you have. Within Obscure, we distribute a solution called Okta that essentially manages that for you. So from a corporate perspective, we can do single sign-on into different applications. We can manage credentials centrally and add multiple factors. Be it a recognition on a fingerprint or a mobile app or an SMS or a phone call, whatever you really choose to do, you can add that as well. And it's where we're moving towards. We need to start doing those things. Everyone needs to understand it. The problem with most consumers as well in today's day and age, no one actually understands the value of data. We've been looking at these Facebook privacy issues recently as well, and we understand, that it's for business accounts and things like that. I don't use it anymore just purely because of how social media can take the data you submit to them, right? If you think about Instagram, scrolling through your feed, I don't know if you've seen that. I can't remember what the series is called on Netflix. I think it's called The Social Dilemma.
Yes.
Very interesting, right? So data is important, and people need to understand, that this is used against them in a lot of cases. If you see those ads popping up on Facebook, popping up on Instagram, popping up in Google, it's very targeted information, and obviously used by corporates. So that's a little bit off topic, but that just kind of shows you the extent of how important data could be. Obviously creating and generating sales leads based off of that. But also, when we look at passwords, it could be detrimental for a business if users use the same password across the board.
Mm.
It's inevitable for someone to start targeting users. It's easier for an attacker to target one specific user. The attack surface is so vague for them to go and attack, and it's so vague for us to protect. Right? We need to
Yeah.
put in firewalls. We need to put in two-factor authentication, anti-malware solutions. We need to do monitoring through SIM. Secure information, event management. There's a whole bunch of stuff we need to do, and it costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time to set up. To be quite honest with you, and it could all stop, just by basic hygiene, in the digital space.
Yeah, I mentioned the large bank that had a senior employee who stole company information through a data leak. The bank insisted it was not a data breach, but a data leak. But that was an example of someone inside the organization with malicious intent. I guess what you're saying, Brenton, is that in most cases, possibly, information leaks or information breaches that take place are not because of a malicious actor within the organization, but because users are not practicing safe computing.
Yeah, so what happens a lot of times, you'll have your targeted attacks where someone does want information from business, right? So you have corporate espionage, you have people that want to take other businesses down, obviously, and you do have, financial repercussions if breaches do occur. If you think about it, if someone had to go and compromise Facebook right now and steal 1 billion credentials, as an example, they can go and sell that data on the deep web, or they can go and sell that amongst each other, and that's obviously very lucrative for them to go and do, or even use scripts to go and log into various other services and go and sell those services, such as Netflix. Buying an account on a hacking forum is quite simple, and it's going to cost you $1 for a Netflix account, as an example. And those things, it's lucrative money for them to make. We do also have the people issue internally. So you do have people with malicious intent. That does happen. There are ways to stop that as well. You have to have proper monitoring in place. Who's executing what on the endpoints? What kind of data they're copying? DLP solutions need to be in place. We can do monitoring with something like Observe It from Proofpoint. Basically make a digital recording of everything that's happening. And the example that you're using, if they had something like that, that would have been cool for them to just kind of analyze and see everything going on.
I suppose, though, implementing something like that, you have to be cautious about how your employees are going to feel about it. For example, if you are monitoring everything that they do on the computer, does that raise any sort of privacy issues? Does that, are there other concerns that companies need to think about, including, I suppose, that employees just might not like the fact that they're being monitored?
Yeah, so a lot of people are against stuff like that. If the asset is a corporate issued asset, the employee should comply according to the contracts and whatever they have in place anyway, right? If I have a corporate phone that's been provisioned to me and a corporate laptop, I shouldn't be using it to download torrents. I shouldn't be using it to browse bad stuff on the internet. So that stuff should be in place already. Those policies should be well defined by the company when they provision these devices. But then you sit with the problem of bring your own device, where someone will bring his own laptop and bring his own and use corporate resources like the internet. But then you also have controls in place just to say, okay, well, we don't allow certain categories to be browsed out. Those kinds of things do exist as well. So we can stop people from abusing various different services. But if the asset is a corporate asset, there shouldn't be an issue from anyone's side, actually.
Now, I think this is a problem that affects every organization, no matter their size. How does a company go about building a plan to protect their corporate information, particularly around, if I can describe it as user stupidity? How do you actually, as an organization, start to tackle this problem?
Well, you've got to start somewhere, and that somewhere's got to be a process or a policy that's put in place. What we've done is we've taken, because we have quite a few products in our stack at the moment. They're all security-focused solutions. However, we also saw that it's some products have overlap in certain aspects. We have more than one EDR solution, for example. We have more than one SIM solution. So we kind of got to map various different solutions into a framework, and we've chosen CIS to do that. There's a couple of different frameworks. You can use something like NIST as well, which is a very popular standard to use. But with CIS, basically what we do is we have a whole bunch of controls. I believe there's 22 in the stack. And then we can start off with, managing assets, managing software on assets, managing credentials, managing vulnerabilities. And then you have something well defined that you can take and you can actually project yourself onto, managing your risk over the next 12 months and then actually reducing that risk, which is something that everyone should focus on. And the problem is, if you look at the traditional way of purchasing security, a lot of times what the guys will do, they'll buy an email solution because they have to buy an email solution. They'll buy a endpoint solution because they have to. But they'll miss a whole bunch of other stuff. You can't secure stuff you don't know about. That's why it's important to do asset discovery. So if you follow a framework, it'll set you far ahead from the competition as well, and probably help you lessen the possibility for a breach. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. At some points, you'll miss something at some point, but then how you react to it is important. We've focused on a very preventative approach in the past couple of years, trying to stop everything from coming in. But we've seen, it's not possible to stop everything. You do get very smart oaks that can break into these different things. So then you need to have the right data. And again, it comes back to data. It's important. So security companies can use data as well. You can use login logs from an Okta, for example, to see where people are logging in from. If someone's logging in from China and they live in South Africa, why does that happen? So then it's important to have that information with you as well to react to a potential breach.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to the way you described that, it almost seems like an organization that's trying to protect itself from all these risks is kind of like a ship that's got 100 leaks in it, and you've got to try and patch all of them, and new leaks are appearing all the time, and it's an ongoing operation. There is no sort of one size fits all. This is what you do. This is how you're going to protect your organization. You actually have to be monitoring everything all the time to try and plug any vulnerabilities that you may have in your organization.
Yeah, no, if there was a silver bullet, then whoever built that silver bullet would be filthy rich. There isn't, unfortunately, there isn't a silver bullet. You need to look at everything from every aspect. It's even talking about, users, people. We've been talking a bit about technologies and things like that, but people, if we can start training them properly, using something like a Proofpoint PSAT, we can basically start doing knowledge assessments on those users and see how well versed they are with various different topics like phishing and maybe a phishing attack, or maybe someone drops a USB. What do you do with it? Do you plug it into your PC? Do you not plug it into your PC? Start training them and reinforcing that to make sure that the users actually understand what kind of a risk they are when they do these silly things like plug USBs into their computers.
Yeah, which is a natural thing to do. You see it on the floor. I wonder what's on here.
Yeah, I wonder if Bob's Excel sheet with his budgets up here. I can maybe see what's going on there. People's curiosity always affect them, and I think curiosity will always kill the cats. So
yeah. Would you say user education is the most important thing companies can do in trying to protect themselves?
It's definitely high up. There are a lot of relevant controls we need to put in place. If you start securing the user, yes, it's gonna put you far ahead. You have to do it. I mean, you can't expect your users to sit behind all this security infrastructure. We've got a lot of security stuff that we use in Obscure specifically as well to look at different things. But I need to make sure that all the users are well versed with these different topics. And we've been focusing on training our internal users as well. Specifically the users in the admin office. Technical should typically know what's going on when a phishing mail comes in. But like as an example, finance might not always look. They're expecting to receive a quote or they're expecting to receive an invoice. Something like that, and they'll open it. But we've been training them, and over the past 6 months, we've actually there were a couple of clicks in the beginning. Then we did some reinforcement training, and every time we send out a phishing campaign internally now as well to test our users' knowledge, everyone does report it successfully. We haven't had a recent issue with that, which is quite cool. So that just shows you reinforcement is important.
Yeah. So I suppose the message is, you can buy and deploy as many security solutions as you can that are available in the market. But if your user's password is letmein01, there's not much point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely going to be bad. So I mean, the security solutions are very important. Password security has always been important, and it will still be important in the future, in my opinion. Obviously adding biometrics and things like that could potentially help with certain things, but you're not going to see that everywhere. You're not going to see, students in a school, they're rolling biometrics out for everything, password related. And if we're looking at online accounts and things like that, you can't log into Facebook with your fingerprint at the moment. You have to have a password.
Yes.
So it's still going to be very relevant.
Okay. Great. Brenton, it's been good to chat to you. If anyone wants to learn anything more about Obscure Technologies and the solutions the company offers, what is the company's website?
So we are at obscuretech.net. We do have a whole bunch of information on our different products on the website. We also have, we have our contact details on there as well. So the phone number's on there, and we also have an email address if anyone needs to do any inquiries about any products. We also do host quite a few podcasts, so we're going to host a few podcasts in the next couple of weeks as well. It's called the Just In podcast, which is just Obscure's internal one. We should be uploading that to the website at some point. We just need to figure out some logistics around that. But yeah, we'll publish a lot of information, and we do have a lot of cool stuff on the site that you can go and look around it.
Obscuretech.net. Go check it out if you're interested in learning more about the company and its solutions. But Brenton Swanepoel, good to talk to you. You are head of the technical team at Obscure Technologies in South Africa. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to Tech Central today.
Cool. Thank you, Duncan.